Namaskar, Nilesh. In another episode related to Mahabharata today, but related to ancient Indian history in general, and also related to the exploration of Indian civilization via scientific method, and therefore via darshana method from the Indian knowledge system. So let me jump directly into the presentation. This has to do with the astronomy evidence presented in the Mahabharata text on the last and the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. There is a description of Venus, Mars, and Mercury together seen in the sky or together being present in the sky on the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. Now, the context for this episode is a comment by one of the viewers, also in the context of the recent debate related to the year of the Mahabharata war between myself and Shri Vedveer Arya that was conducted by HyperQuest Vishal Chaurasiya ji. So this individual, NB, he wrote, Nilesh sir, actually he wrote a long letter, okay? So if time permits, I will address additional questions that he has asked in his letter in future episodes, but that really depends on my time availability and the priority that I can attach to additional questions he has asked. In fact, he sent me one paper of Vedveer Arya, which of course I have already read a long time ago, and he wanted me to critique it paragraph by paragraph. Now, I responded to NB saying if he is specific enough to bring a specific issue, specific evidence from this paper of Vedveer Arya, time permitting, I would respond to his queries. However, if he's going to simply send me I don't know how many pages in that paper, but multiple pages long paper, and simply to critique it, that's beyond the scope of what I like to accomplish through this video series. So I declined I declined his request, let's say. But let's look at part of the communication that he had with me. So he writes, Nilesh sir, watched your HyperQuest debate with great pleasure. I could follow most of it, having read your books multiple times and watched YouTube videos, multiple of them. So thank you, NB. Now, what he says is that while he could follow this debate, he missed multiple things, but I'm going to pick only one for this discussion. This was his first point, anyways. What I missed is comprehending the discussion surrounding Mars, Venus, and Mercury conjunction on the 18th day of the war. What are the Mahabharata descriptions, and what are the calculations, simulations, or what the calculation simulations show for 5561 BCE? That is the date I have shown to be the precise and accurate date for the year of Mahabharata war versus the claim of Vedveer Arya for 3162 BCE. Okay. And those of you who have already seen this debate, great. Actually, it's not something you just watch once and comprehend it. I would encourage all of you, those who have watched already and those who have not, to go back to this and watch it multiple times. Frankly, take notes. Okay, that's the only way you are going to get deep into this and truly enjoy it. All right. So how many? Yeah, well, it shows close to 3,50,000 views, 343K views when I copy pasted this picture, which was today. Okay, so close to 3,50,000, 3.5 lakhs views. So do go and watch it if you have not, or watch it again multiple times. Okay, so let's go to the next one. So I have shown that 5561 BCE is the year of Mahabharat war. I'll not go into the details how we arrived at that. You can watch my other videos, read my books, read my blogs, and that's how it has to be. But specifically, this reference of Mars, Venus, and Mercury together in the sky. Now, NB calls it conjunction. Well, it's not exactly conjunction, but let's hold on to that thought. It's a very beautiful description that we are going to see. In fact, it's just amazing. Like, what I have to still, grasp my head around is actually simply the amazement, the amount of detail and the precision, and God knows what else words I want to add, but the amount of specificity, the precision, accuracy with which Vyasadeva has described these astronomy descriptions, but also the non-astronomy, the terrestrial descriptions. But because we are talking of the astronomy descriptions, let's just stick ourselves to astronomy descriptions. So do read this verse carefully. Bhrugu sunu dhara putro shashijena samanvito charamam panduputranam purastat sarvabhubhujam. Now, a general translation is Bhrugu Sunu, that is Venus, Dharaputro, that is Mars, Shashijan, that is Mercury. They Samanvito, they were together, and Charamam Panduputranam Purastat Sarvabhubhujam. The specific context here is that of Yudhishthir when it's referred to Panduputra. And so that these three planets stood in front of Yudhishthir, okay? And front in the sense of in the eastern direction, because Yudhishthir is facing from the west and he is facing Shalya. This is the last and the 18th day of the Mahabharat war. Now, during our debate, usually we do not have the luxury of going through these nitty-gritty details, but it so happened, and because this description can be beautifully corroborated for 5561 BCE, whereas it cannot be corroborated for the claimed year of Vedveer Arya ji, namely 3163 BC. Now he says it 3162 BC, and I'll briefly describe that, but it's simple to say that depending on the method of calculation or depending on the software you use, it's referring to the exactly same time, same year, but one software may call it 3163 BC, other software may call it 3162 BC. Very precisely, when it calls 3162 BC, many times it will refer to it as minus 3162 BC. Like, it doesn't take zero in between, versus one software takes zero in between minus 1 and plus 1. If somebody wants to get confused with this video is not for that individual. Okay, so let's move on. So whether one software says 3163 or when I say 3163 BC, and I'm just saying this because I want to then do the apples to apples with 5561 BC. The point is, when Vedveer Arya says 3162 BCE, he's also referring to 3163 BCE in the same software consistency that I am referring to. For example, Karina Soft's Voyager 4.5. That's why I said if somebody is going to get confused here, this video is obviously not for that individual. That individual needs to do a lot of homework before the person is comfortable following this discussion. But what I was referring to is that Sri Vedveer Arya ji brought something very interesting. Now it's obvious, but I had not paid much attention to it, okay? Because the shlok, the descriptions demands three planets, Venus, Mars, Mercury, seen in the sky. And so seen in the sky, so that means they need to be on the one side of the sun, okay? Otherwise they will not be seen together. And that's all I looked at, and that does corroborate 5561 BC beautifully. In fact, I would mention that while this particular shlok, this particular description is not corroborated for the year claimed by Sri Vedveer Arya ji, namely 3163 BC, 3162 BC, no other Mahabharata date by any of the additional 100 plus Mahabharata dating researchers, different years ranging between 7300 BCE to what, 400 CE, none of them can show a corroboration of this description of three planets together, this specific three planets together for the year of Mahabharata war on the 18th day. Surprise, surprise. So not many wants to talk about it. So let's look at what this description is. Just do note down Bhrugu Suno Dhara Putro. That's like a plural in the sense of two together, Putro, like Ubho, like that. Okay. And then Shashi Jaina Samanvito. So this was the additional insight that Sri Vedveer Arya ji brought in during our discussion, and I thank him for that. Okay, so if I have to visually show this, what we are trying to say, said in the verse, is like Venus Mars together, as if like they have a conjunction. That's what Vedveer Arya ji said, and Mercury. So Venus Mars together were also seen along with Mercury. Okay, now let me make it clear, this cannot be shown to be the case for the year Vedveer Arya ji is claiming, although he insists that it is the case, but I'm going to show you the evidence here in a minute. Now let's begin with the date that I have shown to be the date or the year for Mahabharata war, namely 5561 BCE, or you can say minus 5560, okay? And November 2nd is the last and the 18th day of the Mahabharata war, on which this particular description occurs in the Mahabharata text. So what it is saying, Venus Mars are together and they were seen along with Mercury. So let's take the time of the 18th day of the Mahabharata war, November 2nd, 5561 BC. This is the day when Kali Yuga began. Mahabharata tells us with 90 plus references. Harivansha says so. Many acharyas also corroborate this, such as say Madhvacharya of Krishna Dvaita, Brahma Dvaita Sampradaya, or Srila Prabhupada of ISKCON movement, that it was indeed the 18th day, the last day of the Mahabharata war, when Kali Yuga began. There are a couple more things, but I'll just focus on this reference first. There's the other one being the evidence related to Bhishma Nirvana. Okay, since I said it, let me just quickly refer to that. Notice the position of the sun. So before, let me just explain, this horizontal green line is the horizon. Okay, so anything below this has gone below the horizon and so cannot be seen. Anything above this green line, such as Mars, Venus and Mercury, they can be seen on the western horizon. Below the horizon is Jupiter, and if you go further down, then you see the sun. Notice the position of fall equinox. So what I'm really saying is the position of sun with respect to fall equinox. Now, fall equinox is basically 180 degrees. The day of winter solstice would be 270 degrees. Okay, so then you have in between approximately what? 90 days approximately. Okay, I said approximately for a reason. Again, if you don't understand it, this video is not for you. But the point I want to make it is, now recall how long Bhishma was on the bed of arrows waiting for the day of winter solstice. 1 degree change refers to sun's journey in a given day, because approximately, again, sun will go through 360 degrees, which is the full circle, in about 365 days. So what does that mean? That means the sun travels on an average about 1 degree per day. At times slightly bigger than 1 degree, other times slightly less than 1 degree, but on an average about 1 degree. That's how we'll get 360 degrees. Okay, so it has just crossed fall equinox, and maybe couple of days or so, whatever that time is, and so we have 90 days between the sun's position today and the day of winter solstice. Now remember, Bhishma fell in the battle on the 10th day of the war, and then we are looking at additional 8 days of fighting. So today is that day here. November 2nd is that 18th day. So 8 or 9 days have gone by. And if you take this 90 and add to that 8 or 9, that will take us to 98, the precise point being greater than 95. So the Bhishma Nirvana evidence also corroborates only 1 year in the entire range of various claims that go over 7300 BC through 400 CE, that 1 year is 5561 BC. But let's get back to this specific evidence. So Vedveer Arya brought to the discussion that, look, they all three are not in conjunction. So he said, Nilesh, but your three are not in conjunction. And he's right, but I don't know what the issue is, because I never said that they three are in conjunctions. In fact, it's better that they are not three in conjunction. In fact, the description also says beautifully, Bhrugu Suno Dharaputro, these two together, Shashijena Samanvito, along with Mercury and Mercury. Now, this particular translation that I'm showing on the right, that Venus dash Mars and Mercury, is based on my very recent discussion in the last 10 days, because after what Vedveer Arya ji had said, and I understood what he said, but it just so happened I was talking to a individual, a PhD in Sanskrit, some other additional subjects, philosophy, but also with good command over Sanskrit. So without giving any of this background, I put forward this verse to him, and I said, okay, how would you translate it? What exactly it is saying? And so visually, this is how he told me, hey, this is how you can represent Venus dash Mars and Mercury, as if, So now look at the picture on the left. 2nd November 5561 BC, the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. Look at Venus and Mars together, and along with Mercury, but they are not together, and they all three could be seen because they three are on one side of the sun. Sun has already gone below the horizon. It's a time of a sunset, or time rather after sunset. Jupiter is also gone down, at least that's how I shown the picture, okay, to eliminate or minimize the confusion, okay, among the novice astronomy 101 student. And so you can see after sunset, Vyasa or students of Vyasa, somebody on behalf of Vyasa, observing the sky and noting down Mars, Venus next to each other, and then also Mercury on the western horizon. So this is a beautiful, very precise, accurate corroboration of that shlok, Bhrugu Suno Dhara Putro Shashi Jena Samanvito, okay, from the Shalya Parva. Now let's look at the situation for the claim of Vedveer Arya ji. That's where I said 3163 BCE, for consistency in the software that I'm going to show you. He calls it 3162 BC. For that apple to apple comparison, I would need to call it 5560, like negative 5560, okay, something like this. Essentially, whatever we are calling it, we are referring to the same date, and we are agreeing on how we are calibrating this, not agreeing on the date, okay, the date of Mahabharata war, just how we are calibrating. So there is no confusion among us, me and Vedveer Arya about this. Okay, so I'm just copy pasting some stuff, relevant stuff from the paper that NB sent it to me. So quickly I will read that. Venus and Mars in conjunction along with Mercury on the 17th, 18th day of the Mahabharata war. Actually, it's on the 18th day of the Mahabharata war, but he's saying 17th or 18th is perfectly fine. In fact, there is no need for an error here, but we can easily assume an error of plus minus 1 day as to when exactly the observation might have been made. I don't see in this case why there would be a reason for calling it possibly 17th. No, there is no confusion whatsoever. This is a very clear, clean observation on for the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. But sometime we have to, not sometime, all the time, we should be willing to give an error of plus minus 1, because remember, when a phase and position of the moon might be noted, which is usually at night, because you may see the moon even during the day, but you will not able to see the relative position of nakshatra, okay, the nakshatra context. So we might be watching this on the previous night just before sunrise, or we may be watching on that same day after sunset, and that can make some difference. So error of plus minus 1 is okay. Now, in the Gita Press edition of Mahabharata, this is what Sri Vedveer Arya is writing. It is noted that Venus and Mars were in conjunction with Mercury in close proximity on the 17th, 18th day of the war. So his translation is also correct. And again, as I said, I thank him for bringing these additional nuances, the specificity in the precision, and how precise and how accurate and how specific Vyasadeva is in describing this evidence. Truly amazing. Specifically, Venus and Mars were in conjunction in Dhanishta. I mean, he is now describing this for his date, okay, 11-12 November. Which is also he calls the last day of the war, which is correct in the sense from his calculation, because he assumes the war begins on 26th October. Yes, the 12th November would be the 18th day of the war, while Mercury was positioned in Purvashara. Again, we don't need this nakshatra, because keep in mind, in that particular verse, Bhrugu Suno Dharaputro Shashi Jana Samanvito, there is no mention of nakshatra anyways, okay. He's just simply stating the situation for his claimed date. Considering that the war commenced on 25th October, okay, now this is interesting. He says it here 25th October. In some other place, he calls it 26th October. Maybe because of that confusion on his part, he's referring to 11th, 12th, or 17th, 18th day of the war. Okay, interesting. Anyways, we'll ignore that. November marked the 18th day. Well, again, he agrees here on the 12th November marked as the 18th day. Now that's surprising, because see, let's start counting from 25th. Maybe I am wrong. 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Okay. So then, because if 25th is the first day, then 11th November indeed becomes the 18th day of the war. So I'm not sure why he's calling the 12th November as the 18th day. Be it as it may, that's not going to, I mean, I don't see the value behind this additional confusion. There was no need for it, but it does not matter, because at the end of the day, we are going to show that the Mahabharata description is not corroborated for the claimed day by Vedveer Arya ji. Whether he claims 11th November or 12th November simply does not matter. So what is the scenario? Now pay attention, guys. There are a lot of nuances here, okay? First thing, let's agree to a part that he does show, okay, which is to say that Venus and Mars they are together, they are above horizon, and so thus they could be seen on the western horizon after sun has gone down below the horizon. Okay, so that part is good, and I would encourage you to go back and watch that hyperquest debate, because I said that, if we start picking on these nuances, then it's like looking at the tennis game. So for example, can he show Venus and Mars together on the last day of the war? Yes, and I can show that too. Okay, so that's like a 15 all. Okay, now can he show Mercury along with Mars and Venus? It doesn't have to be close to them, as the description says anyways, that they is maybe away, but above the horizon on the one side of the sun. The answer is no. So there the description of Mahabharata does not agree with the claimed day of Vedveer Aryaji, and therefore claimed year. So that's like a 30 points to me, 30-15. Okay, so he doesn't get that point. 1 point is added to mine because I can show that. Okay, notice where his Mercury is. It's, if this is the sun, so when it's in the sky or otherwise, even at after sunset, it's bright. Mercury is already gone. It's not to be seen anywhere along with Venus and Mars. Okay, unlike what I have shown you here. Unlike Mars, Venus, and Mercury, they all three could be seen above the horizon after sun has gone down. Okay, but there are more issues. Quickly, let's address the issue of Bhishma Nirvana. The Bhishma Nirvana, Mahabharata text evidence tells us that Bhishma was definitely on the bed of arrows for greater than 95 days, from the 10th day of the war to the day of winter solstice. Notice, winter solstice in astronomy speaks is 270 degree. Remember, we discussed sun travels about 1 degree, so just taking that as approximation. So 270 minus 210, that's 60 days. And how many more days here? Possibly like 2 days or 3 days here, for sun to get to this point. Now, this is already the 18th day of the war per the claim of Vedveer Aryaji. So let's say you add additional 8 days, and what's that going to do? That may take to 62 plus 8, that's 70, maybe max 71 days between the 10th day of the war, when Bhishma is supposed to fall down in the battle, and the day of winter solstice. So Vedveer Aryaji's date can only have 70 or 71 days between the 10th day of the war and a day of winter solstice, which is unacceptable to the Mahabharata evidence, because Mahabharata evidence demands a minimum of 95 days and not 71 days. 95 is a lot higher than 71 between the 10th day of the war and the day of winter solstice. So that's another problem. Well, there are only problems, guys, with the date of Vedveer Aryaji, but it is important that we use this data, and I'm thankful to him for putting these efforts, come up with a specific year, willing to look at some evidence, albeit in a cherry picking fashion, but at least looking at some evidence, at least the one evidence that appears to match with his date. And therefore we can have this discussion, and hopefully therefore people can see what is right, what is wrong, what is a valid claim, what is an invalid claim. Just like a guna dosha, the dosh has a value because in the absence of the context of a dosha, you cannot see the guna. Okay, the good, the good guy and a bad guy, the hero in the Hindi movies and the villain, the hero's greatness can only be seen, perceived in the context of a villain. Okay, so otherwise the movie would be very boring. So that's what we have here. Okay, so Mercury is on the other side of the sun, so for that purposes this Shashi Jaina Samanvito, so this entire verse is not validated for Vedveer Aryaji's year. But if you are willing to cut this into bits and pieces, the Bhrugu Suno Dharaputrok, that much portion is available. So if you have to do this tennis game kind of thing, we'll say, okay, both gets 15 all for showing Venus and Mars together. I get additional point, that is 30-15 now, because I can show Mercury also could be seen with Venus and Mars after sunset. Okay, let's go further. I can show that the Bhishma Nirvana duration, Bhishma Nirvana evidence of greater than 95 can be shown for 5561 BCE, beginning 2nd November, even the 18th day. That calculation I just walked you through. But Vedveer cannot show that. He can only show maximum of 70 or 71 days. I can show 98 days, which is greater than 95 as desired. Okay. So that's an additional point if you want to take, just in the context of discussing this evidence and the pictures I'm showing you. So now we have what? 4015? Okay. And now let's score the point. Okay, and let's score the game. Now on the right I have written something, and I did discuss this with NB, but I'm making a quick summary for you. And he liked it. He was just astonished, to see that. Now imagine on the 18th day of the war, okay, assuming only for a second, okay. Now somebody says, but Nilesh, you said in your video that 3162 BC is the year of Mahabharat war. No, I'm not saying that. That is a claim of Vedveer Arya ji. It is wrong. It is false. It is been falsified. Okay, it is a disaster. I don't know what language I need to say to make this clear. But for a minute, let's assume that this date is correct. Then isn't it surprising that Vyasadeva is describing Venus and Mars along with Mercury, which is not even on the same side as Venus and Mars with respect to the position of the Sun, and therefore not valid. But something more interesting, and I hope you have noticed it. Right between Venus and Mars, there is that bright planet Saturn. And as if like those three are in conjunction. But somehow Vyasa forgot to mention that Saturn. Okay, so therefore I wrote on the right side, even an ordinary student of visual astronomy ought to ask, what made Vyasa mention Venus and Mars together along with Mercury, which happens to be on the other side of the Sun and thus not visible, together with Mars and Venus, yet completely ignore Saturn, which is sitting between Mars and Venus? I would like to hear your arguments from scientific acumen, from Nyaya Darshana, from anywhere. And actually there are a couple of arguments that you can make, at least from Nyaya Darshana, and I want to give this as a homework to you guys. The idea is to assist in your learning, in Sanskrit or all the, now I'm not sure how many official Indian languages are in the Indian Constitution, but at least when the Constitution was formed, there were 14 languages, and in all 14 of those languages, there is no word for teaching. We use the word shiksha, but that is really learning. So learning is only via self, others can assist, and so that's the idea of discussing these videos. The idea is not that you watch these videos in a passive mode. I mean, initially maybe okay, but if you truly want to get total excitement, perpetual joy out of the Mahabharata or out of Ramayana, out of our epics and out of our ancient Indian texts, then you have to participate. There is no alternative, guys. Absolutely no alternative. That's why the Swadhyaya Pravachanecham. So isn't it surprising that Vyasa as if forgot to mention Saturn? Well, the reality is Vyasa very likely would have very nicely mentioned these three. He might have said Bhrugu Suno Dhara Putro Surya Putren Samanvita or something like that, because that's Saturn. He didn't do that because 3162 or 3163 BC is not the year of Mahabharata war. Okay, so that's a game just for this one observation, and game goes to Nilesh Oak. Tennis speak, of course. Okay, I think that's all really I wanted to say. If those of you who have already read it, time to reread these books. Those who have not read it, and if this is the area of your interest, definitely worth investing your time, money into these books. This is not a one-time read. You have to read it multiple times. along with watching appropriate videos. Well, that's your call. You may be smart enough that you don't need to watch a video, and that's great too. But many people tell me they find extremely beneficial to read these books, read the blogs, and also watch the videos in parallel. Okay, this is the setup in India via Subbu Publications for these three books. That's how the covers look. Okay, the historic RAM is same as 12,209 BC, no difference, just two different titles. If you are in America or outside India, then this may be the easiest way to go to Amazon and read these books. Okay, all right, so quick summary. 2nd November 5561 BC beautifully corroborates Shalya Parva description of Venus, Mars and Mercury standing in front of Yudhishthir on the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. Vedveer Arya's exploration of astronomy evidence is cherry picking at best and inconsistent at worst. Now, inconsistent for various reasons, because neither this description matches nor the duration of Bhishma, a minimum duration of 95 days on the bed of arrows, and many other issues. But the inconsistent part is not necessarily clearly explained in this video, and I don't know if I will ever have a time to go through his other evidence, especially unless NB or somebody else picks a specific point and ask me the question. Otherwise, if there is no interest, at least not one listener who is curious to know the difference, there is no point me doing the videos. It's just not a good use of my time or anybody's time. Okay, but the inconsistency is a consistent theme for practically all other, barring a few exceptions, 4-5 exceptions. Those individuals are no longer living. Okay, and in those 4-5 exceptions, I'm referring to likes of Lele Shastri, Bharatacharya C.V. Vaidya, Bharat Ratna Pandurang Vaman Kane, Brahmarshi Dr. P.V. Vartak, great astronomer Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit, etc. Okay, I might have missed one or two names, but really, if I have missed it, only one or two additional names. Otherwise, it's an extremely pathetic affair as far as the Mahabharata dating researchers are concerned, whether from the Indian background or non-Indian background. Okay, the last one. 12th November, actually now I realize 11th November, and so Vedveer Arya is not even consistent in his paper. Sometimes he says 25th October as the first day of the Mahabharata war, other times he calls it 26th October as the first day of the Mahabharata war, and depending on that, it will turn into 11th or 12th November as the last and 18th day of the war. For this particular evidence, it doesn't matter much, but one must be very clear as to what it is. I do understand, depending on the evidence, because sometimes the evidence is only for a tithi and a nakshatra, and then it's not very easy to state whether it is like this day or the next day. So I do understand the challenges and the difficulties. As I said, they do not apply here anyways, but it may be helpful to still stick to one particular consistent reference point to avoid these issues. Anyways, so 12th November or 11th November 3163 BC or 3162 BC, depending on how the measurement is done, still the same evidence. The evidence doesn't change. What I showed you as simulations, they do not change. It is only what we call, it's like kilograms versus pounds or inches versus centimeters or something like this, or 3163 BCE versus minus 3162, okay, and so on. So this particular last day that Vedveer Arya is claiming for his year does not corroborate Shalya Parva description. Worse, it does not explain why Vyasa missed bright Saturn in the middle of Mars and Venus, assuming he wants to stick to his date. he better explain. And I'm sure one day he will come up with the explanation. He's not bad at explanation. In fact, he can, once you tell him what to explain like a salesperson, he can explain it. The problem is what can work in sales and what may be rewarded in sales is not rewarded when you are doing a scientific investigation. And that's the challenge for practically 99% of Mahabharata dating researchers. Okay, they lack scientific acumen, they lack logical reasoning skills, they are hit and miss when it comes to Tantra Yukti, and then there are more problems such as inconsistency. Okay, but we will discuss that as and when time permits. So verse I said, it does not explain why Vasa missed bright Saturn in the middle of Mars and Venus for his date. So while supposedly including Mercury, which is on the opposite side of the sun and therefore cannot be visible along with Mars and Venus. All right, I want to stop right here. That's it. Please write your comments. Please tell me if you find this, if you found this useful. Also write down when you write a comment or ask a question briefly that if you have read my books, if you have read my blogs, if you have watched additional videos. The reason I mention this is before you ask a question, and unless you have gone through my books or my blogs, I wouldn't say or, and my blogs and watched through some videos, it's not very useful for me to entertain your question and try to answer it, because very likely you will not understand it. Okay, this is very exciting, but this also takes efforts for an individual to understand what is being said. All right, that's it. I'll see you soon in another episode on another interesting subject. Namaskar.